All right, everyone, welcome back. Let's get our next panel going. We will be spending the next 30 minutes with a focus on why ML projects fail and how to ensure their success. Obviously, a topic that we have been talking about throughout, starting with that conversation with Fran. But I'd like to invite up our panelists to dive in. Can we get our panelists up? First panelist is Adrian Cartier, Vice President of Data Science at Ocelot Consulting. Next up, Andy Mintier, Senior Director of Emerging Technology, Data Science, and IoT at Walmart. And Juergen Weichenberger, Chief Data Scientist at PET Consulting, Inc. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Sam. Great to be here.
Glad to be here.
Great to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So, I think I'd like to start with a question that I asked earlier of Fran. You see quotes, again, Gartner has this quote of, 60% of data science projects fail. What are your experiences with that? Do you see these types of projects being particularly fraught with failure? Andy, how about we, and actually before we do that, I'd like each of you to very briefly give us a few moments about your role and organization.
Sure, absolutely. Happy to do that. Andy Mintier, I'm a Senior Director at Walmart Global Technology. That's the technology group within Walmart. And of course, Walmart's a small retail company. So extremely happy to be here. I'm part of the Digital Transformation Services organization with that group. And my team has responsibility for AI products engineering. So what that means for us is that we build AI products to transform how we work within the company. So, and I'm lucky I have some fantastic, incredibly smart engineering teams, engineers, data scientists, focusing on building a range of ML products, including computer vision and natural language processing and many other types of things. As far as my background, I've led data science teams for 20 years, not all at Walmart. I had a good range of subject areas that we had data science teams working on, IoT being a key one of them, retail, manufacturing, finance, and several others. So for me, I've learned so much over the years. It's incredibly exciting to be part of it, and just watching the machine learning evolve over time has been fantastic. So thanks for having me on.
Awesome, thank you. Adrian, what do you do at Ocelot?
Thanks, Sam. Glad to be here. Adrian Cartier, I'm Vice President of Data Science at Ocelot Consulting. And what we are is we call ourselves a modernization company. And it was spun out of the fact that the founders, as well as myself, had backgrounds and experiences at large enterprises, particularly helping large enterprises modernize from on-premise bespoke model development to streamlined processes for data science and scalable cloud engineering and infrastructure. And so what I'm primarily doing is taking all the lessons that I've learned on what worked, what didn't work, to try to help other companies in the area, as well as across the company, stand up and scale out their data science practices. And my background, I used to be a math professor, so my background's algebraic topology, which you can imagine is a highly theoretical sort of discipline. But I had always been interested in the intersection between mathematics and solving real business problems.
Nice.
So while I was teaching, I fancied myself wanting to start my own consulting company, and I had a couple of projects with clients in the area, and I realized that I liked it. I liked being able to take some of these foundational disciplines of math and statistics and get companies to receive value out of it. And
Perfect.
throughout the years, I've had individual contributor roles, leading data science and engineering roles, and glad to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Adrian. And Juergen, great to see you again. Juergen was on a panel at the last TWiML. Tell us about your role at Accenture.
Thanks, Sounds pleasure to be here again. Yeah, so yes, you introduced me to P&D Consulting Company. Yes, that's my own company, which I formed before I joined Accenture. And yes, the role of the chief data scientist there in Accenture. I'm responsible as the lead data scientist for about 10 industries where we're looking at. Walmart is one of them, where I newly be responsible. So it's a very interesting endeavor how to see how we can make, let's say, machine learning a scalable product, because it's still very interesting. For that, I have formed a team which we call industrial analytics, and it's a little bit of a transformation from how we have seen data science originally, more from an orientation of an engineer who has to solve a problem, who has to solve a complex manufacturing problem, a production problem, or gets a formula and stuff like that. And for this, okay, you need to create a more kind of a bit of person who works on the human-machine interface as a translator. So he really listens to the guys on the shop floor who are facing the issue, and then thinks about, okay, how do I translate that into the data science world? How do I translate it into the zeros and ones of data? So we have now quite a nice team. You can imagine how to find these people. We're really working in various industries on cutting edge projects. And from my background, I have this dual background myself. I'm an electrical engineer on the one side, but then stepped into the world of applied computer science, bioinformatics, cybernetics, because I found like that's very fancy, and somehow got stuck with that the last 20 years. And, I never thought it's going to happen that way, but it's like when I was in the university, AI was a no word. If you said AI, they were just shooting at you inside you, be a demon. And then over these past 20 years, how all these changed and how it's gotten work across the industries. I know we started heavily in telecommunication, in retail, and then it panned out, went into financial services, into all these other industries. And that makes the journey so interesting. And it, for me, is like I can bring back research we did at the university, which I can implement today because I have the horsepower, which we in 1995, like we were poor guys on the university. We had some small old school Sun SGI microstations, and today you have that in your phone, and this allows me to do much more things today.
Nice. So kind of going back to that fundamental question around the failure and machine learning projects, Andy, I'd love for you to kind of kick it off and share some of your perspective at Home Depot.
Oh yeah, well, Walmart. Yes. Yeah. So we're talking about the failure. Yeah, that's okay. Okay, that's good. So the failure rate, and I think it really depends on how you define failure. Because there's some cases where the project you could complete, you hit the targets, it's done, all check marks are made, but nobody uses it and it's not implemented. I would call that a failure because it's not driving value. That's the whole point of it. So I'd say you have that definition. Yeah, there is unfortunately a high failure rate, but on the downside or the upside of that, I think there's still a lot of learning even on those things that may not make it into production. So it's a failure, but it feels to me like a lot of things are on the path to success if you handle it right.
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I appreciate the way you kind of take even a further step back and start to ask the question, what is failure? Adrian, when you are engaging with clients around these types of projects, how do you help them set expectations around failure and success?
Yeah, great question. And this stems all the way back to my previous life working at an enterprise, which is you always want to go in and understand the definition of success. So understanding the business problem, what is the current state of that business problem? What are the business metrics that define success to that business problem? And then after that, it's important, and the keynote mentioned this too, and I always say this, which is, how do you envision this being used? Who are the end users? And so from a success perspective, it's, you know, the business metrics to evaluate success, and is it getting deployed? Is it getting used? Is it going into downstream business processes? Because, you know, the worst thing that you can have is a set of models in your portfolio that are just sitting in a POC state, that are just sitting as bespoke solutions that a data scientist is running on his or her laptop, emailing spreadsheets or dropping it into a file share. And so understanding the current business process and where that integrates into the workflow of the end user will enable you to really capture the success that you're hoping for at the beginning of the project.
Awesome. Juergen, your role is one that puts you in contact with lots of different customers and several different industries. Do you see this question around failure and success emerging differently in these different industries, or is it more uniform across them?
It definitely varies from industry to industry, client to client. And typically it has to do with where are they on their own maturity, on maturity from a data science perspective. I mean, some people, it's how do I even define and determine the things to go after? So you're looking at the front part of that funnel. Others are, what are ways that I can measure an analytics project or an ML project to determine whether or not that's successful. So typically what I like to do is sort of understand where they are on their own maturity curve, and then share with them the data science lifecycle framework that I used back when I was in enterprise organization. And what that does is it defines kind of sets of success criteria that you want to meet as you mature through the life cycle of model development. And it's not rocket science. I took it from software development. They've been doing this for years. You know, you've got discovery, proof of concept, pilot, pre-production, production. And what are the things that you want to do in that pilot phase? Because that's really that tipping point to determine, am I going to move this initiative to large scale production to create digital applications out of it?
Great. And Juergen, from your perspective, do you see similar things across the industries that you operate in?
So the determination of failure can be very different. It depends always whom you ask. And as Adrian said, if you ask the IT or the CDO function who build it, they say, oh yeah, that's a great success. It's a great application we have built. If you go to the business end user, they may say, I never have asked you to do that. I never wanted that. So, or you even have not understood what my problem is. And when you translate that up into the C-level, I mean, they seeing, depending on the industry, very heavy capital expenditures. I mean, you spend hundreds of millions of dollars for these programs and for the underlying platforms. This is not all coming free of charge. And then they're questioning very quickly, where's the value? Why we do have to do that? We're still producing high quality products. If you go in a more service oriented industry, in the telco space, their perception is very different, because when they're looking more on how do I maintain customers, how do I keep attrition low, how do I not losing these guys. So for them, the expectance of having strong machine learning in place is like a must-have. It is then more, how can I eke out the last promilles here and there to be better than another one. So it's really very different in industries what they are looking at and where they're also in the maturity curve, because If you be in automotive, they have a very different expectation. For them, there's a lot of new stuff. If you be in telco or in retail, which are doing a lot of things for the last 20 years at a very, very high level. So the CEO has a very different expectation, and then maybe smaller projects are already seen as a failure compared to when you go somewhere else. We say, okay, we are the heroes. Nobody else in our industry has that, and even things which are not great are seen there as a success, or similarly then as a big failure if they're not coming to conclusion.
So Andy, at Walmart, when you're evaluating the portfolio of projects that you oversee, what are the things that you're looking for as a leader when you talk to the individual teams to get a sense for what's on the right track, what needs some poking and prodding in different directions?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great question. That's actually something we talk about quite a bit. And I like to think of the portfolio a lot like an investment portfolio, right? I want diversification. I want some things that are higher risk and some things maybe less risk. And I'm going to expect some things to fail. Like just like a good performing investment. Like, if things aren't failing, then we're probably not stretching ourselves hard enough. But what I like to look for a lot on the teams is how the teams feel it's going, but then also directly talk with our business partners. And we take more of a co-development type mentality. So we really want them deeply involved, but also understand how they feel it's going. So we'd like to see them in line and both sides happy. Sometimes that's not quite there. But if the customers don't feel that that's happy, and I view that there's a couple of levels of customers. There's the executive sponsor, which is very important. They need to be engaged. But I think it's not just that. We need mid-level managers that are responsible for the processes that the machine learning products and projects are going to affect. And the people that are going to work with it day to day. The human side of the human element, I think that's really important. So we need engagement from all three levels, and we really want to see all three levels are engaged and happy with the process. So we see those things line up, and the overall diversity and the projects that we're taking on, I'm happy, like things are going well.
Mm-hmm. Adrian, similar for you. I saw you nodding.
Oh yeah. As I was listening to Andy, I was taken back to these portfolio planning and design sessions that I used to have with our business partners. And so similar to the way that the keynote mentioned it, having a business partnering relationship. And so what I would do is I would first want to understand what's the overall strategy of that business unit. So whether it's I want to reduce my cost of goods by X%, or I want to reduce my churn percentage by Y%, whatever that strategy is for that unit. And then have a session where we say, what are all the levers within this function by which I can pull to execute on that strategy? So those become the sets of key critical decisions that happen within that functional unit. And then those decisions become analytics opportunities. And then what we do is we say, okay, given these decisions, I ask them, in a utopia, if you could have all the data available to you, what data would you use to make this decision? Mm-hmm. So we have this data mapping exercise. And then we say, given this utopia, what data exists? So then that gives us sort of data availability, feasibility. And then we end up ranking these things from a t-shirt size perspective, high, medium, low, in terms of risk. And then we end up with a portfolio. And I loved his analogy of stock portfolio. We have this portfolio of high risk, low risk initiatives. And then we pick some out of those. And then to mitigate the likelihood of failure for each one of those initiatives, we always identified someone close to the operations to be a part of the ideation, development, and execution of the pilot. So that way he or she is able to communicate back whether this was successful or not. And when they stand up in front of their business units to say this is successful, then the conversation of investment for a digital platform or digital product becomes easier, because they're able to say, this was helping me reduce my cost of operations. This was helping me understand the levers that I can pull to minimize churn for my customers.
Okay. Okay. I'd like to take a moment to encourage our audience to submit your questions for our panel via either the chat panel or the Q&A, whichever one works best for you. Juergen, I'm curious, many of the industries that you work with are characterized, at least in their core businesses, by these immense investments, required to spin up a new product or operation, and heavy industries and the like. Does this idea of failing fast mean something different in those organizations? Do they look at the world differently because of the experience they have, needing to invest, billions into new wells or things like that?
So that's a super interesting question. So the terminology fail fast in the data world for them means quite a lot, because they often see it, okay, it's like if I drill a new well, it costs a lot of money. So I want to have very, very quickly certainty if that really helps me. So, and when we had 6 months or 12 months ago, they gave you 3 to 6 months time to say, is this really going to work? Nowadays, they give you 4 weeks. It's like, if you can't answer within 4 weeks that you have the right data sets, you have a plan of how to crack the analytics problem, and you be able to produce the right end application which drives value, then you better don't do it. And you just run through that cycle really fast, even faster than 4 weeks if you can do it. But really give me an answer after 4 weeks. Can we do that in a sustainable way? They try to answer very big questions. And we just recently worked on a project where the client told me, look, if you can crack that problem, it saves us from building a new refinery. And that is a double-digit billion-dollar decision. So it also tells you how much space they have, how much space they originally built it in their facilities. And now they're saying, okay, we want to use this headroom. We want to be in a position to leverage these headrooms in a way we want. But for that, we need to become a data-driven enterprise. And that is the big mindset change they are making. And you're not getting overnight a data-driven enterprise. That takes time. And they are very cautious at this point in time. So they want to make these steps in a controlled way, say we are in control. We're not just giving 3-4 big companies a fortune of money and then we cross the fingers and hope the best. So this is no longer in a way. So that's why they're using fail fast to check these steps along the line. It is very agile. It's not meaning they're doing it waterfallish or something like that. They're doing 15 things at the same time, and then 5 drop out and the other 10 go forward and the next 15 come in. How fast you can, usually how fast you can run. And sometimes where we are nowadays, I was struggling, we don't have enough people. They want to run faster, but simply you only have so many people, and that is now becomes the limiting factor in going through these evaluations. What do I really do, and what do I set aside? I mean, often is also the thing is you can do it from a data science perspective, but your data is not ready. Your data streams are not ready. So you say, okay, we stop here and then we wait till the data engineering team gets ready and then we continue. It doesn't make any sense to sit around and idle or to try to build a model when the foundation is not there. And so fail fast it's not necessarily all about failure anymore. It's about, okay, do I have the right maturity grade that I can build this AI solution? Or do I need to do something else in advance? And when the predecessors or the prerequisites are here, then I get back and do it.
So it sounds like the idea is kind of successive application of a risk mitigation strategy to get you to the certainty required to make the big investment.
that's what they are seeking, is they're willing to put big investments there, but give me a level of confidence and certainty that I have also the perspectives, because what changes with this fail fast is also the expectation of ROI. So you don't have 2 or 5 years anymore on an AI application to prove ROI and value. We're going in, when 12 months is already long, it's going more down to 6 months and lesser. So some things like you be 8 weeks in operation and your investment is already back. And so this whole cycle time is very, very different, and we knew it from traditional software development processes where, okay, you implement your SAP and you know it takes 5 years before the costs are paid for. In an AI world, you don't have that time frames anymore. Man. Everything gets shorter. A CEO tenure, a CDO tenure is much, much shorter than it was 5 or 10 years ago. And hence the challenge or they put on our shoulders is similarly high. You have to prove that it comes back much faster.
Got it. Got it. All right. I want to try to get in a couple of these really, really good questions from our attendees. I'll start with this one that just came in from Will, and I'll direct it to Andy. A lot of the prior examples and discussion imply or start with the premise that the customer's already bought into the need for a data-driven solution. How does the approach change when the customer is not 100% convinced that they need a data product?
Yeah, and I think that can be pretty common. A lot of times there's some people in the group that are convinced they need a data product, and they may be convinced it's really the technology that they need. And there's others that they're skeptical, right? For them, they're like, okay, how does this gonna affect what I do? Is this gonna be a black box? How do I trust it? So what we do in those situations is really engage the people that are most skeptical and take an approach of let's empower them first. And that may not start with an ML solution. That maybe start with simply, simple data collection and dashboarding, right? As a start to get them comfortable with the data that leads to that ML solution, and ease them into that where they start seeing the benefit and how that works with them, and they have a voice in it and they learn to trust it. We found that path works well, and we've had people that were initially very resistant and turned into like the highest advocates by the end of the project. So
right.
So yeah, but it's tough. Like I think like ML projects in general, they take a real deft hand to get them from start to it does. Like I think a lot of times that's underestimated, but there's a lot on the people side, right? Technology is important and it's not easy, but I think the people part of it is really tough, but it's the most satisfying when you get it right.
Awesome. So you're prompting me to jump to a great question from Alexandra, and maybe since we're close to the end of time, I'll just have each of you give an answer. I'm not sure that we'll be totally surprised, but we talk about this triumvirate of people, process, and technology. Each of you state which of those you think is the greatest risk to machine learning projects. Andy?
Yeah, so and I really hate to say risk because I feel opportunity, but I think it's people. But I think it's really a lot of it's on us, our lack of consideration for those people and how it affects them, how it's going to change the work. How do we empower them? That's the opportunity. So like it's risk, but also a huge opportunity. But it's tough to get right. I think it's harder than the technology, although that isn't easy either.
A quick response from you, Adrian. You're shaking your head. I'm sensing that you agree.
100% it's people. And I do agree. It's both directions. We have an obligation, but also it starts from the top. I mean, making sure that your senior leaders are setting the example of embracing experimentation investing in data literacy, having their organizations think about data as part of their strategies, then they'll at least understand that thinking this way and doing things differently is part of my job. But it's also incumbent upon us to help bring them along. Because at the end of the day, I've been in these situations where people would say, I've been doing this job for 25 years and I've been doing it successfully. And so being able to help them understand that this is an augmentation, not a replacement of what you do, and have them part of that process will change and shift their thinking a little bit.
Great. And are you going to introduce some controversy here, Juergen?
No, I can't agree more. It is people. And I think, as Andy said, it's our obligation to take our customers on the journey with us. And I had a very nice quote from a client project where the CDO said to me, what I'm doing is I'm enabling my shop floor guys to write an application to Google and become a Google engineer. And I think that is the kind of mindset you need to get into. It's not just the technical and the AI teams are on an evolution, on a journey. You have to take the whole company with you. And as we evolve, you have to get those people open in their mind and allow them to think about data, ML, AI, not as a magic black box anymore, because this is what scares most of these people off. They see a black box, they get instructions, and they don't know, they can't really make it up in their head. Why should I do that? What's the reasoning doing it now this way? We have never done it the last 30 years. That's why it's so important to take these people along with you, building the trust and confidence. And then, as Andy said, then they're opening up suddenly and say like, oh, heck, it makes my life so much easier. And that's what we want at the end of the day.
Great, great. Well, Andy, Adrian, Juergen, thanks so much for your contributions to the panel and your great responses to my and our attendees' questions.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot,
Sam.
Sam.
Great to be here. Thank you.